Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed Sophie Lord's fascinating talk. From Sophie in Cambridge to me here in sunny Oxford. Big thank you to Tim Greenhalgh for creating this event and for our CEO Jane Geraghty for opening it at early o'clock this morning. Let me just get this screen shared. So I'm Morgan Holt, Chief Strategy Officer at Fitch. As I say, it's a sunny lunchtime here in the UK, dinner time in China, and the sun is just rising in San Francisco. But one thing, of course, unites us all, and that's what we're going through right now. This is undoubtedly one of the most unusual and painful times for many people. And if we look at some of the businesses that we serve, some of what we've seen is companies hunkering down and conserving cash, and others are readying for what their customers will need on the other side of this crisis. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Every crisis, of course, is different. They're all underpinned and have foundations in different areas, and almost by definition, we can't anticipate them because otherwise we'd have mitigated up to that point. But there does seem to be something particularly intense and painful about this one. Probably because of some of the health and social aspects. But there is one thing that is common to every crisis, to each crisis, and that is that it takes our assumptions as consumers and it challenges some of the things that we believe. And in doing so, we discover new values, new ways of getting what we need. And in doing so, we develop some new behavior patterns that persist on the other side, that continue on the other side of the experience. And the brands that anticipate this and that design themselves, redesign themselves to fit those new behaviors are generally the ones that succeed. And ultimately, our job, all of our jobs, my job, all of our jobs in this time is to re-stimulate demand, is to get demand back underway. Because this is what people don't say, but it's how they act. It's the reason that experience is so important to stimulating our economy and our businesses. The more your experience matches my need, so the more your brand can interact with me in a meaningful way, the easier it is for us to come to an agreement. The easier it is for me to give you what you need. And at the heart of that is what we're looking at, creating an experience that resonates with people and meets them where they are. So let's go back to a crisis in living memory, 2001. It was the burst of the dotcom bubble. So this was the first peak of businesses working out how to use the internet, as it was moving from an internet connection of networks and computers to the web, and businesses starting to build out on that. And as consumers, we had previously, for anyone who was around at the time to remember it, we'd previously developed an assumption that big business meant successful business. And in the 1990s, what we'd experienced was a huge sweep of globalization, of multinational brands, of multifunctional brands. And as consumers, we'd become used to looking for those signals of scale, those signs, the big, the brash, the powerful. And so when dotcom businesses started rolling out, they aimed to be successful by scaling up in the same way, in those same traditional ways. For a ton of different reasons, many of those business models started to fail, and that caused a recession, which of course was then eclipsed by 9/11. But as the big dotcoms started to fail, as consumers, our attention started to shift towards something else. When all those oversized fashion shops started to fail and the pet shops flopped because they were forced to deliver a single can of dog food on a forklift pallet, what we started to notice was the real secret superpower of digital. And as consumers, we started to pay attention to something that it was able to do that nothing prior to that had been able to do, which was that it could listen to the way that we used it, and it could respond in a way that was much more personal, much more relevant. So as consumers, we started to look for signals of it. And so the successful brands were those that went beyond that crisis were those that had found ways to be relevant to us individually. So they had the authenticity of connecting real people to real people, whether that's Facebook or whether it's Etsy, that network effect of being able to make something genuine, authentic, individual. And even the big old rusty businesses like Telefonica, those big telcos, they felt that they were honor bound to harness that desire to innovate and to change at speed. And in fact, the corporate language started to change significantly for that time and still runs now, where those organizations know that they need much more agility, much more entrepreneurialism, to be braver, to have more courage to try and do and learn more within their organizations. And so you would get the incubators that were starting to come out around this sort of time, so that the corporations could be more relevant by being more agile. So let's jump forward to the next major crisis, the financial crisis of 2007-2009. Now, the big assumption that preceded this financial crash was growth. We assumed that everything was going to grow. It was up to that point considered a natural truth of the way that the world worked. If something was good, it would naturally become more. But when the fragility of that market was exposed, we found we couldn't simply borrow on credit anymore. House prices crashed. The business models that meant jobs and pensions were generally safe fell apart. And for those people who still had a job, the notion of healthy work-life balance just stopped making sense. And it was around this time that mental health awareness really started to rise. Now, what's interesting about this time is when you look at the experience data on either side of it. So at Fitch, we use something called experience themes, which are ingredients for how you design an experience. They correspond to what a person needs, and they respond with a set of semiotic patterns and cues and ways of that experience coming to life and interacting with a human being. And these 12 ingredients allow us to create a map, a pattern map, for what the experience expectations that people have of a brand are. Now, what we can do is we can map this methodology to a range of different data sets. So whether that's BAV or Brand Z or exit data, this is Brand Z. So that gives us 650,000 consumers across 23,000 brands. What we get to do here is to understand the experience that people expect from different brands at different times. Now, in the lead up to the financial crisis, people wanted experiences that were personalized, so they helped them to fit around themselves. They wanted something that was a bit more creative, that helped them express themselves, that taught them new things. But what's interesting about the data is, as you come out of that crisis, people started to reward brands for different things. They wanted brands to be simpler, more entertaining, to help them achieve, to set and beat their goals. And they rewarded brands that showed a different future and helped reinvent the rules to get there. So a different type of experience, a different set of ingredients that go into that experience. And it's also not a surprise, not a big surprise anyway, that the consumer expectations of the banking industry experience globally has been shrinking year after year after year ever since. So the brands that really started to change the game beyond that crisis were those that championed empowerment. So you can see that in the experience themes of reinventing the rules, personal achievement, seeing a different future, these brands had the empathy to know that things needed to change and that it was in their power to make it happen. That image on the left is some of our work with Motorola in partnership with Bono and Bob Shriver's brand Red. Partnership became a very big deal coming out of that 2007 to 2009 crisis. These are brands that were able to create an awareness and a debate and an action that promoted much greater positivity and diversity. And they also provided access to the world. It was one of the roles that people expected from the experience of a brand was access. A big key to empowerment is access. And we mustn't forget that this was the moment when Amazon went from a very solid business to a game-changing brand. So where are we today? Well, we're just starting to see a shift in the expectations that consumers have of a brand's experience. Over the past couple of years, there has been a building demand for creativity, for teaching, for bringing people together, for making fundamental change happen. These are signals and ingredients of a global experience. And people have hungered for it, and as a result, they've looked for signs of it in the places that they go and the brands that they buy. But of course, that's a global picture. And in fact, if you tune into Peter Knapp, the Chief Creative Officer at Landor, in about 2 hours' time, you're going to hear him talk about the impact of place branding and how a country or a city brand can resonate with its people and attract tourists inwards. So different countries and different categories, they all have their own distinctive shapes of experience expectations, and specific brands, when they do it well, also have specific patterns to their experience. So for instance, in France, consumers of beauty products are increasingly, they've been looking for indulgence, creativity, a place to learn. And so when we designed the Lancôme flagship on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, this is what we designed, this opulent cathedral of color and light where people can indulge and immerse and learn. If we flip over to the other side of the world, to Singapore, where the consumer experience in the telecoms industry is it's a blend of desiring entertainment and imagination and breaking the rules. I won't steal his thunder, but Tim Greenhouse, the Chief Creative Officer at Fitch, is talking more about this particular experience at 4 p.m. UK time. This was what we designed. It is a really exciting demonstration of breaking the old rules and making new ones, translated into this unmanned store in Singapore. So what we're just starting to see now are some new themes coming into people's expectations of a brand's experience because of the way that people are solving for this situation right now, because of the assumptions that are being challenged, because people are discovering new ways to interact with brands. Now, we anticipate, and the data tells us, that on the other side of this crisis, it's going to be a lot like what we've come from, but with some new flavors. A bit more focus on nurturing. That means giving people a space to relax and to recover. A bit more of a focus on helping people understand what's happened and what's next. A real commitment to bringing people together when they want it, and also to strengthen the things that they have. It's a shift, if you like, from radical creativity towards more of a signature of imagination and thought. And when we design an experience, we use something called an experience signature. So it's a set of principles that shapes everything that the brand does, from how it says hello to the products that it creates. And the shape of an experience signature usually boils down in some way to these three questions. What is it doing? How does it feel when I'm inside that experience? And how does it help me? And imagination and support is starting to shape a new signature where, as a consumer, I think less about what I'm buying and more about how this brand is solving things for me, like Nike here. It's not selling, it's solving, and in its own incredibly purposeful way. You know, if you ever wanted to play for millions, now's your chance. That purpose that's driving Nike is right at the front of what it does. Second part is, how does it feel? Well, as a consumer, it seems that people want to think less about escaping. You know, we've spent a few years now exploring a kind of romantic, materialist escapism, but there's a sense that we have a renewing relationship with home in the broader sense of the word. not just the building, but community, friends, local, home from home. And the brand's role is to facilitate that home finding. And lastly, how does it help? How people want brands to help is less about having a million choices, but helping me make the choice that gives me confidence. Aaron Shields talked earlier on about the one perfect choice that actually drives higher customer satisfaction. He also talks about dreaming, exploring, locating. This is really the place where it helps me explore. Example here with Sainsbury's is if it's explained why I have a choice that it's in front of me, then we are drawn towards that. So less than a million choices, find the choice that gives me confidence. And this is the signature that's just starting to emerge. And the brands that take their own experience signature and flavor it with these extra ingredients are going to start to see a resonance on the other side of this crisis. And like I said at the start, this is all about stimulating demand. It's all about meeting the consumer where they are and making it easier for them to say yes to you. So that's my 10 minutes. I'm Morgan Holt, the Chief Strategy Officer at Fitch. These are 3 things that I would encourage you to do. A crisis always challenges assumptions. So what are the assumptions that are being challenged right now? They could be about health or about work or something more fundamental like, how we better understand what we have. That's the first thing. Second thing is look for new ways that people are interacting with brands. How are they using differently? What's missing in there? Those new behaviors that people develop are going to continue beyond this moment and inform the way that people connect with brands that they love and brands that they don't yet know. And lastly, a lot is made of the digital experience. It's important, particularly to us white-collar workers who look at computer screens all day, but the only right experience is whatever's relevant to the individual. And yes, there will be a calibration towards virtual working. And yes, there will also be a huge bounce back to physical, and maybe even a deliberately analog, deliberately anti-digital effect that comes through as well. But it really doesn't matter if it's physical, human, or digital. What matters is that it's right for people. So that's me. I'm Morgan Holt. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Fitch. If you want to get in touch, I'm on LinkedIn anytime. Pretty easy to find. Next up, in about half an hour, is Michelle Smith, and this is one that you definitely want to catch. Michelle is going to be talking about dotcom and dreaming. So we talked about dreaming, exploring, locating, and different mind states that customers have. Where is the dreaming in dotcom? And that's what Michelle's going to be talking about in about half an hour's time. So in the meantime, I will sign off. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you another time.